Hey guys, what's up? Before starting this video, I would like to point out that if you are a student, you can sign up for a GitHub student pack, and from there you can actually save a lot of money. So we're going to be using DigitalOcean to host our program, and they'll give you $50 in platform credits for free. Also, there's many domain registrars here, so you can get a free domain from name.com for 1 year, making the cost to set this whole thing up minimal. I believe if you are connecting a PayPal account to DigitalOcean, then you have to make a $5 deposit still. If you're connecting a credit card, it should be free though. Otherwise, if you're not a student, you can, or I think this applies to both students and non-students, you can use my referral link for DigitalOcean, which should get you $100 in credit for 2 months. So you can use that to mess around with and learn. Otherwise, enjoy the tutorial. Oh yeah, one more thing. This entire tutorial is written on my blog, so if you're ever confused or you want a written version where you can follow in your own speed, just go there. Also, I have all the code snippets there, so it should make it a lot easier. What you will need to get started with this is you need to have NPM installed. You need to have a domain, which you can point to your server later. Python 3 installed. Version control system such as GitHub. Additionally, if you sign up with my referral link, you get $100 in credit on DigitalOcean for 60 days. So this should be your DigitalOcean dashboard once you create an account. The way DigitalOcean works is you have projects, which are kind of like groupings of your servers. So there's lots of different types of like server management things you can do. Like you can have droplets, or you can have like databases and stuff, and you can like group them by project. So I just have one main project here, as you can see right now. That's what I use for my personal things. I'll create a new project for this YouTube video so you can follow along. So I'm just going to call it testing. I apologize in advance for my keyboard, it's very clicky. It doesn't really matter. So now that we have a project set up, let's create a droplet so we can start off. So it's actually really nice because we're using CapRover, which is the Heroku clone type thing that we're going to be using. And they've actually created a like one-click installation thing. So you can go to create droplets and then go straight to marketplace, see all marketplace apps. And from there we can do a search for CapRover. And then let's click on create CapRover droplet. Let's start off with the default stuff. Over time you can of course just go into your droplet and upgrade as you want. You can take a look here at the prices. Choose your location. So I'm going to click Amsterdam because I live in Amsterdam. But depending on your location, you might want to go somewhere else. You can select additional options. For now, I'm just going to leave it as monitoring. It's nice to be able to see at a glance from your dashboard your system uses and stuff. Then for authentication, you want to set up SSH keys ideally. So I already set one up. The way you do it basically, if you're on Linux or Mac, it's quite simple. You have to open up your terminal and just follow the tutorial they provide you. You just paste this in, run it. It creates a private key, and you just basically put the private key or the public key into here, and it adds it to the keychain. If you're on Windows, you have to use PuTTY. But there's an entire tutorial created for how to do this. Once your SSH key is added and you've given it a name, you should see something like this. So mine's called Alfred Desktop Linux from my previous project. You can give it a host name. So this is basically the name of your server in your project so you know what it's called. So I'm just going to call it testing YouTube. You can add tags to your server, which is useful for when you want to organize your project or your droplets. So let's say you have you're working for a client and they have multiple things, you have different clients. It's a good way of differentiating between them. So I'm just going to say testing. Of course you can change everything. I'm just saying testing because it's a YouTube video. Now you can you can pay for backups. It's $1 a month per droplet. However, you can also go inside CapRover and create manual backups from there, which is free. Or for example, if you have, if you're setting up WordPress, in WordPress you can add a plugin which automatically creates backups. It's also free. And actually, since CapRover, its underlying technology is Docker, you could there are some scripts you can find on the internet which also create backups for you without having to pay, but it requires a bit more work. So let's create our droplet. Now we just wait 1 minute. Okay, great. Now our droplet has been created. We can see the name, the IP address, the specs. This is also where later you can add more power to your droplet if you need it. So you can see their pricing. Okay, now we basically have a server set up with CapRover, and our next task is to go to our domain registrar like GoDaddy, Namecheap, or name.com and point our domain to this IP address. So for me, I go to name.com and I'll show you what I do. So this is my domain. I'm going to use alpha.software. I go to manage DNS records, and here I can see all my DNS records. So now we have to add a DNS record to point to our new server. So what we do now is we create a new record with type A. For host, let's set up testing. Well, we set up a wildcard, so what we do is asterisk, which means anything can happen, dot testing, then dot our domain name. So on name.com, the way they do it is they already fill in the next part of the sentence. So I'm going to do this. And then for answer, what we want to do is we want to put our IPv4 of the server we just created. So that's this. So copy and paste. And the time to live, it doesn't really matter, but I usually go with 600. Once you've installed npm, we can install the CapRover command line interface. So the way you do that is open up your terminal or command prompt and type in npm install -g CapRover, and this will install the command line interface for CapRover. Once you've successfully installed the CapRover command line interface, what we do next is we set up our server. So the way we do this is we execute the command CapRover server setup, and it will ask us a couple questions which will help us initialize it. So have you already started CapRover container on your server? Say yes. Now we have to give the IP address of our server. So let's go back to our droplet. Let's copy that IP address and let's paste it. Okay, so now that we have that done, we add our new root domain. So that's what we just added to the DNS record. So remember, I was using testing.alfred.software. So depending on what you're using, it will be different, but for me it's testing.alfred.software. Now we have to set a password. This will be for logging into our CapRover server. I'm just going to do testing 321. Enter your email. And give it a 1 second. Now you have to come up with a CapRover machine name. So I've already had a couple of machines, so for me it says Captain-03. You can give it whatever you want. For you, it's probably going to default to Captain-01. So I'm just going to say Captain-03, but you can say whatever you want. If you want to confirm the default, just press enter. Okay. If you've successfully done this, you'll get this message that it's been completed, and it is available at this URL. So let's go to this URL. Okay, this isn't working. Okay, great. So now we have a login screen. Let's log into our server. So for me, it was testing 3, 2, 1. Okay, awesome. So now we're logged into CapRover. So this is basically going to be the platform from where you're going to be deploying your applications. So first things first, let's run an update. So while it's updating, you might get some errors like that you're unable to do certain things, but that's because it's updating, and you might have to log out and log back in for it to come back to normal. Yeah, this is normal, don't worry. It's just updating the software. Okay, awesome, we're back. Let's log in. Let's set up monitoring now so we can actually see if something goes wrong, or generally see what's happening with the server. So for example, the last couple of days I've been doing a lot of work on the server, and I got messages sometimes on my phone that the RAM usage was really high, and also told me that it was recovered, so that's really cool. Just close that. So here you can set up your alerts. Okay, let's see. So here we can see everything our server is doing. So you can see it's quite busy with the CPU right now. RAM usage. Yeah, there's honestly more graphs than you can wrap your head around. Uptime as well, which is quite useful maybe. Also generally you can see alarms here for when there's errors. They're categorized by their severity. So the way you deploy to CapRover is similar to Heroku if you're used to that. You basically just create an app, and you can do whatever you want with the app, and you can have lots of apps, and they're all running in their own environment, and they're all isolated from each other. So let's set up our Django project. We're going to be using PostgreSQL as a database. So the great thing about CapRover is you can either create like a bare bones app configuration and set up everything manually, or for many programs or many software, they already have a one-click system where you simply just have to fill in some boxes and then click initialize, as you can see. So PostgreSQL. Okay, let's give our app a name. So I'm just going to call it testing because it automatically appends -db to the end of it. Select your Postgres version, your Postgres username. So I'm going to say testing username, and I'm going to say testing password. Now you probably don't want to do this for obvious reasons. So what you can do is go to like password generator and just generate some strong passwords and put them in. Make sure to write them down somewhere though. Default database, I'm just going to call it default. And you can add additional arguments. Let's deploy this. Okay, awesome. Now it's done. Finish. Cool. So now we have a Postgres database. We can configure some stuff here. So if you ever want to change these environmental variables, you can. Also, you can bulk edit them. Yeah, this is not really relevant to this little tutorial, but you can explore this later if you want. So now let's set up Django on CapRover. So the way we do this is we are going to be using a template that someone else has created, since he configured everything correctly already, and it will save us a lot of time. So I will link the repo down below, or go to my blog where I basically go through this entire tutorial I've written, and you can follow it step by step. This is also where you'll find code snippets and stuff. So let's clone this repo. So the way I'm going to be doing this, I actually want my project to be on GitHub. So I'm just going to create a new GitHub repo and then download it and drag it over. So we will be using a template created by Marco Kamner. This template's amazing because he already organized it so that it works perfectly with CapRover. The only thing is, I primarily use GitHub, and this is on GitLab. So what I'll do is I'll create a new repository on GitHub, and then I'll just drag over his files to my repository. But if you're using GitLab, it's fine. We just want to set up a version control system because it will probably save us a lot of headaches in the future. Also, what you can do is you can actually connect your GitHub and set up a webhook so that whenever you push, it auto deploys on your server. Similar to on Heroku. I believe you can also set up a system where you push and it auto deploys. So I cloned the repo to my local environment. You can do this from VCS and then get from version control. Here now I will drag over the files from this guy's GitLab repo. Okay, if you've successfully extracted the files from the GitLab account to your own repo, you should have something similar to this. So it's your standard Django stuff. It's already configured to have one app in it, as well as requirements.txt. There's a git ignore in his repo already given to us. If you saw what I did previously, I initialized it with a git ignore myself. That was not necessary. So the one unique thing about CapRover is that every time you deploy, you need this thing called a captain definition. What it basically is it tells CapRover how to deploy it. It has some Docker information as well. The captain definition provided to us is perfect for our case, so we won't have to change anything. You can use this as a template as well for future projects. So the first thing we should do is, if you want to work on it locally, is probably to install a virtual environment. So the way you do this, if you don't already have a virtual env installed, you can install it with pip install virtual env. So this is what you should execute. If you already have it, you can just ignore this. So let's create a virtual environment. Virtual env space -p /user /bin /python3, and let's call it py3env. Okay, now let's activate it. Source py3env /bin /activate. Okay, we're in our virtual environment now. So let's install the requirements.txt. Let me just check if I'm in the right directory. Okay, I'm not. Let's change directory. Now I am. Okay, let's install the requirements.txt. Pip install -r requirements.txt. So while it's installing, every time you go and work on your Django project, you need to activate your virtual environment again if you're not familiar with it, because all your dependencies will be installed there. Okay, let's migrate now. Manage.py, migrate. Okay, cool. So one small thing we should change about this template, however, is that it is in German. If you're German, you could just leave it if you want. Otherwise, we can change it by going into Django project, then settings.py. Then on line 75, you should see where it says DE. Let's change that to EN. Awesome. Now let's create a local admin account. So Python manage.py create super user. I'm just gonna call it Alfred. Password. Okay, cool. Now let's see if it runs locally. Python manage.py run server. So you can't see because it opened on my other screen, but it ran correctly. We can see hello world. So now let's set it up so that it works properly on CapRover. Okay, before we can actually deploy it onto CapRover, we actually have to create an app for it on CapRover. So we created an app for our Postgres, but we didn't create an app yet for the Django yet. So let's go back to CapRover. Let's create a new app. There's no one-click app for Django, but it's very easy to create a new app. So I'm just going to call it testing Django. This is what it will be called on our dashboard here. So testing Django. You can tick persistent data, but it depends what your website is going to be used for. So if you click on this question mark, it will actually tell you. So basically, if you have any kind of website which has disk data on a disk which constantly has to be served instead of in like a database, then you want persistent data. Otherwise, you don't, generally speaking. But it's a good idea to read through this whole document. So testing Django, create new app. Okay, cool. Let's go there now. Okay, let's configure our Django to be properly linked with our Postgres database. So what we do now is we have to just set up some environmental variables. So what we do is go to our Django app configs, bulk edit, and here we will just copy and paste over a bunch of text, and we'll just fill in what we need to fill in. So for CR host, you want to name it after your app domain name. So go to HTTP settings, you should find it there if you're not sure. It should be your app name dot your subdomain dot your domain. So let's copy and paste that over. Our database name, for me, was default, but if you're not sure, you can always open a new tab. I actually did this just before recording this, and here you can see your app configs. I'm right now in the database app, and you can see here that the database is called default in my case. So default. The user, in my case, was testing username, and the password in my case was testing password. Now the host is this part plus the name of the app of your database. So it will be testing DB, but if you're unsure, you can find it under your database app, HTTP settings, and you can just copy and paste this part in red. Okay, cool. Now that that's set up, we can go save and update, and it should update our Django to be configured correctly. So now that our environmental variables are set up correctly in CapRover, we can go to our Django project locally, and we can deploy it to CapRover. One thing I want to point out before you deploy is that it's really important to make sure your captain definition is also commit and pushed. You can see by default it didn't actually commit and push my captain definition, so I'm just going to re-push and commit that to make sure it's in the repo, otherwise it will not work. So let's see, we want this, and we want this, 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 and this. We want everything except the virtual environment, basically. So commit, and let's push it. As you just saw, it didn't let me push straight away, so what you can do is you can just commit it and then do Control-Shift-K, and then you can push it from there as well. Just a little tip. Or you can use a terminal. It's actually better. Okay, cool. So now it's not red anymore. So now that we commit and pushed our captain definition to our repository, we can deploy our code onto CapRover. So the first time you deploy your code, you're meant to give CapRover some details so you know which app to deploy to. However, anytime after that, once you've done it the first time, you can use the command default so that it automatically just pushes it and it doesn't ask you for any additional information. So the command to deploy is CapRover deploy. And yeah, like I said just before, after you've done this once, you can do this again with the word default, and it won't ask you any questions, it'll instantly default. It's just the first time that you'll have to tell it. So you would probably have to choose Captain 01 if this is your first time using it. For me, I've done this a couple times before, SEC, so I'm just going to use Captain 03. And you should now see your apps. So we have the database and we have Django. Let's choose Django. We want to use our master branch. You could specify if you have like a dev branch and you want that to be under a different app so that you have like a developer version and an actual production version of your app running. You can separate them, which is quite nice. So let's just do master branch for now. Yes, we want to deploy. So now it's building our source code. This can take a little bit. Okay, our app is now successfully deployed on CapRover. We have to do a couple more things, like set up a super user on the remote Django app. So let's do that now. So make sure you have SSH on your computer. So SSH root at, and now we enter our IPv4. So copy, paste. If it's the first time, it'll ask you this. Write yes. Okay, cool. So now we are SSH'd into our server. From there, we have to access our Docker container. So what we do now is we have to execute an interactive terminal. Basically what that means is just copy and paste this code. It's available on my blog post. And where it says my app name, change that to your Django app. So for me it was testing Django, I believe. Okay, I've done that correctly. You should also see user source app. And then what we have to do is just create a super user. So Python manage.py create super user. And now we can just fill in the information as we do normally. So I'm just going to give it Alfred testing 321 testing 321. Cool, so now we have a super user. We are done here, but I want to give one more tip quickly. If you're ever having issues with Django and you are not sure what's happening and you would love to see like the debug log, what you can do is SSH into your server, and once you're in your server, you can, wait. Okay, so this is what you would see once you SSH into your server, right? So once you're in your server, oh, by the way, the way I just exited that was with Command D or Control D. Okay, so once you're in your server, you can run this code and it will show you the log. So paste Docker service logs, and then where it says my app, you have to add your app name. So Django testing in my case. Oh, it's testing Django, sorry. Cool, so I can see now what is happening on the server. So you can see it automatically ran migrate. Okay, so let's see if it works and try logging into our server. So let's close this. It the way you can close a connection is with Control D. So CapRover, apps, Django. Just click on it. Boom. So now we have our Django web server running. By default, it's just routed to say hello world. There's a couple more things we want to do. So you see how we're not using encryption. It's very easy to set up. So the only thing you have to do is click enable HTTPS. And this doesn't cost anything, it's free. You just have to click on it. So let's let it run for a bit. Okay, cool. And let's also take this force HTTPS and then save and update. Okay, cool. You might get this, just wait a moment. Cool, so now basically we have our Django web server working. It's encrypted, it replies correctly. Debug is off. One more thing we might want to change in the future is that we have a nicer domain. So right now we're using our internal domain URL structure. So we have our app name followed by our subdomain followed by our domain. So let's say you want it to be something else. We can do that pretty easily. What you have to do is you have to go to name.com or whatever DNS registrar you're using, and you have to just fill it in basically what you want. So you go type cname, and then you set what you want. So for example, I want, let's say cheese, and then we just point it at our internal URL thing, so this thing. So copy that, go back here, let's set it to 600, add record. Okay, so now that we have that done, we just have to go back to our Django app, and we have to let Django accept this connection. So CapRover, under app configs, you see where it says hosts, we just want to add the new one. So the way you add it, it's basically like a list. Don't put spaces because it will break it. Just put a comma and then whatever you just added. So cheese.alfred.software, I guess. And let's save that. Once you've added your new domain, which you would like your Django web server to point to, you click save and update, and then you go to HTTP settings, and you have to connect your new domain. So cheese.alfred.software. Should say new domain connected successfully. If you have an error, sometimes it can take a while for the DNS to propagate. So you can do a Google search. There are some tools you can see if the DNS servers have been updated to reflect your changes yet. Otherwise, if it worked correctly, you can go back to here and then enable HTTPS on this new domain. Okay, cool. So now if we go to this domain. Okay, so it actually took a while for my DNS request to propagate through the system, maybe like 10 minutes. So now when I click on this subdomain I added, it works correctly, you can see. So cheese.alpha.software is pointing at this URL, which is the Django, and it's returning what we wanted to return. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. So whenever you're coding, you can just make some changes, then you can push it, and you can speed up your deployment by just typing in CapRover deploy default. So you won't have to add all that extra information you did the first time. And one more thing, you can go to your monitor. You can see how much RAM is being used, your CPU. So as you can see, I still have about 50% left, so I could probably add another Django server on top of this or two. Yeah, if you're confused, check out my blog post. I try to go over it in more detail. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below or go to my website, which is linked in the description. There you'll also find a written tutorial on this entire video. So if you're confused or you want to copy and paste snippets of code, just go there. Otherwise, I hope you have a nice day, and thanks for watching.